Welcome to Milton and King's On the Wall podcast, where we engage in conversations with artists, designers, and more. Today we speak with Silvana Azzi Heras, the creative director for House of Heras Boutique Design Studio in Sydney, Australia. We hope you enjoy this conversation. If you do, please subscribe and consider leaving us a rating and review. Hi, Silvana. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And just before we really get started, I just want to make sure that I'm pronouncing your last name right. Is it with a hard S, like Harris, or is it
Heras? That's perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was Heras, like more of a Z sound, but
No, it's
Heras.
Heras.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So it's Silvana Azzi Heras, and it's House of Heras. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for joining me. It would be morning for you, 10 a.m.-ish in Sydney, right?
Correct. Kids are at school, and I am at my desk.
Oh, perfect. How many kids do you have?
Two.
Two, and they're both school age at this point.
Yeah.
How old are they?
Raphael is turning 8 tomorrow, and Inez is 11.
Oh, beautiful. Very nice.
Yeah.
Have you always lived in the Sydney area?
Yes, we have. We've lived in New York for a minute, 3 times, which was fun. Yes. But most of my life has been spent in Sydney, yes.
Okay. What brought you to New York on 3 separate times? Like, do you actually lived there for a period of 3 different times in your life?
Yes. So the first time we were doing La Boheme on Broadway, so this was with Baz Luhrmann and his wife, Catherine Martin. And then the second time what were we doing? Oh, we were doing pre-production for The Great Gatsby. And then the third time we were doing The Get Down, which was that Netflix series.
Okay. And so
And I got pregnant.
You got pregnant while you're working on that.
Yeah. So then I came back and never went back. Well, we've been back to visit, but not to live.
Okay. So that would have been, you said, 8 years ago?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And was that the deciding factor? Was when you got pregnant, you said, okay, I need to go back home and raise the kids?
I think so. I think I also wanted to be close to my family, especially my mum.
Yeah.
It's very hard to have kids without, support.
Yeah, it's good to have that familial support system.
Most definitely, yes.
With the little ones, yeah. How did you like living in New York when you lived there?
Oh, we loved it. Loved it.
So on each of those occasions, how long of a period were you there for during those times? Was it just like a year? Or?
So the first time, I think because I was there just as a visitor, I was there for 3 months and I'd left and come back. So it was 3-month lots. But the second and third time, it was a lot longer. But nothing, I think the last time was close to a year.
Mm-hmm. You were living in Manhattan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. What were your impressions?
Oh, it's just everyone, you just walk the streets and it's just buzzing. It's just a different type of, energy. You come back to Sydney and you're like, oh, it's so chill here. What is there to do? And you would never ask yourself that question in New York. I know that sounds, but it was like, yeah, you could be who you want to be. Creativity, it was just something to do. Wherever you look, there were things happening, and it was just exciting. And we were working on exciting projects, and the people you meet while you're there. And I don't know what New York is like at the moment. I heard it's quite different, but when we were there, we have the best memories of being, in the West Village and you just walk everywhere. And
right.
We never kind of felt the need to leave New York when you're there.
Right. It does feel like the center of the universe sometimes.
It does. Yeah.
You were mentioning how it was, you said it felt very creative, like very easy to be creative there. I always wondered, I always hear about something when it comes to Australia, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it, called the tall poppy syndrome.
Yes, that
Do
is
you
so
find
true.
do you find that
Yes.
that's something that's real that exists in Australia, or is it just
Oh,
what are your thoughts about it?
100%.
Really?
100%. Yeah. So it's just, I think, who we are as a people. Like, it's when you're in America, everyone's kind of encouraging you and, trying to push you. Everyone's your agent. Whereas in Australia, everyone's trying to downplay. Well, you're kind of trying to downplay what you do.
Hmm.
And people, it's not like that. It's not that they don't want you to succeed, but there's not that much of the same encouragement as you would get when you're in the States. That's what I
Yeah.
found anyway.
And for anybody not familiar with tall poppy syndrome, it's the idea of that, if you get too tall, they sort of try to cut you down to size so that you don't stand out above the crowd.
That's right.
And
Don't get too big for your boots.
yeah, it's in some ways it seems like a way of just keeping you humble, and maybe that has
Correct.
that might have obviously a side effect to it, to where you feel like you're not in the most encouraging environment or
Yeah,
something.
or competitive. Yes. Like you just feel like you can't really do better than what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, but you found New York was very conducive and
Oh, I
to to
loved it.
to the
Most
creative
definitely,
juices.
yes. Yes, they were flowing.
Yeah, I always love going to New York, and I tell people, when they go to experience it and they want to know what to see, and I always tell them, you don't really. It's New York has its own, like I guess most cities do. They just some places just have a vibe, and just
Yes.
sort of being there kind of is enough. So I always just say, just walk down the street and go to your local cafe or something,
Yeah.
and you'll
Yes.
experience just the vibe of New York. But it's the same way if you're in LA or Brisbane or something like that. It's just every place has their different vibes to it, and New York definitely has its own unique feel for sure.
That's true. But LA, you can't really walk to many places. It's a lot of
No,
driving, I
yeah,
find. Yeah.
yes, it's a car culture out here.
Yes,
Everything was built very spread out and far apart, so there's not much for. That's why public transportation's so horrendous here too.
so are you in LA?
I'm just outside of LA, so I'm more. I don't
Right.
know if you're familiar, but I'm more towards Orange County, like Disneyland, that kind of area.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
grew up here and lived here my whole life, so I'm very familiar with LA, and been in and out of the city, more times than I could count. But yeah, in terms of like settling down, I've always tried to stay out of LA a little bit because it's a bit too crowded, too much. You know,
Yeah. We
everyone's
lived in
trying.
LA when we were doing the post production of Moulin Rouge. So
Hmm.
Baz and Sam had this house, and all the staff lived in there, and it was lots of fun. We were doing post production at the Fox backlot,
Yeah,
and it was just. But that was so long ago. I imagine it's very different now.
yeah. What year was that?
Oh God,
You said? What did you say it was?
2000
Okay. Yeah,
Moulin Rouge. Yeah,
a lot's changed. I mean, a lot hasn't changed, but certainly, it's hitting a tipping point in terms of the. I suppose New York's the same with like crime and things like that. I
yeah.
feel like the pandemic and some of the policies have been a bit tough for a lot of people to deal with. So it's reaching a breaking point, I think, for a lot of people. But that's a whole nother subject.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you've touched on a few things. I'd love to dive in a little bit into your background because we've dropped some names here and there that people might be familiar with. So just briefly, before we actually get into your designs, which is the primary reason I feel like the thing that we have in common with Milton King and you is you've launched a new collection of wallpapers that we'd love to talk about. But I'll get some background first. So you're in Sydney. You've lived in Sydney your whole life with some brief stints in New York and LA, it sounds like.
I
In
was born
terms,
in Lebanon.
oh, born in Lebanon.
So I came to Sydney when I was 2.
Okay. Your
But
parents
yeah,
brought you
almost my
to,
whole life. Yes.
yeah, that's good. Do you ever go back and visit Lebanon? You have family there?
Not at this point in time because it's a bit scary, but
Yeah.
I do have family. I have been back. I went back about 10 years ago, and it was amazing. Just so emotional.
Yeah.
Just to see it all again. Not that I remember anything when I was 2.
Yeah, but are your parents still around?
Yeah, they're here. My whole family's my immediate family's in Sydney. We have some relatives in Lebanon still, yes.
Do they have fond memories of Lebanon? And I'm guessing there's...
They watch there's like an Arabic channel, and they're obsessed with it. So they don't watch news in Australia. They watch news in Lebanon.
Yeah.
But they do feel like they've come to the lucky country and that they would never go back and live there.
Right.
So they're very happy and grateful for coming to Australia.
Right. Was there something in particular that made them want to move, or was it just wanting a better life for their kids? And
it was the Civil War in 1976, so they moved back then. They moved back here then because they were here before. Then they went back. They thought, we really want to live there. Mm-hmm. Then the Civil War happened, and they're like, we're coming back. So that was the decider.
Yeah. So your parents must are very rich in experience, dealing with some pretty
very traumatic times. Yes.
Yeah. But I imagine, like anywhere, even with some bad things that happen, if it's a place that you've grown up in and you've lived, you still have fond memories of those places and have those cultural ties and things that make you sort of wistfully, think about those times there, and with a lot of fond memories, I imagine.
Yes. I always say that Lebanon's their first love. Mm-hmm. It's where they met and grew up, and, their families are there.
When you were visiting, you said it was about 10 years ago?
Yes.
What did you find the most appealing about there that maybe someone that has no idea wouldn't really think about?
Do you know what? I just felt like the people had not given up. And it's every second house has been, bombed and still has, they're rebuilding. They've rebuilt so many times. But they just, their love of life, even though there wasn't, the electricity would cut out, every 2 hours, that was not stopping them from living their life and being happy and living life to the fullest. So they were just, the people there were incredible. I'd just walk the streets and they'd recognise who my parents were.
Oh, really?
They're like, you're the daughter of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes. How did you know? Well, you look exactly like your mother when she was your age. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
But it was just so emotional to see my parents, showing me where the house was that we grew up. Not that it's there, it's been rebuilt several times. And the people that looked after us when we were young, and, it was really special.
Sounds like a very strong spirit the people have there.
They do have, yes. And imagine like how many times they've gone through these hardships. So they're very resilient.
It's interesting when you think about that. Like, I'm sure you've experienced people that are living pretty well that have a lot of complaints, and then you have people that are living literally in areas that they probably have a lot more serious stuff to complain about if they wanted to, but like you said, they're living every day with joy and happiness and probably
grateful. They're grateful.
Grateful to be alive, kind of.
Yeah,
attitudes.
It's so true.
Yeah,
it's so
interesting.
True.
Did you go to school for art and design, or?
Yes.
You did in Sydney.
Yes. Yeah. I my first degree was a Bachelor of Welfare Studies, so kind of more like a social science degree.
Okay.
And my second degree was a Bachelor of Visual Communications, a Bachelor of Design in Visual Communications.
So what is that exactly? Visual Communications.
So basically you do everything that's got to do with design. So you do photography, graphic design, illustration, animation, screen printing, and then you kind of focus in on the things that you want to do in your last 2 years. It's all aspects of design.
So before you got into, before you started studying that, did you already have a natural, I imagine going into it because you had some sort of natural knack for, was it drawing? Was it
Yes.
sewing?
So
Was it, you know?
it's very interesting. I only just found out that I used to draw all over the walls growing up at home. This is because I've got three brothers and a sister, and they all told me this recently. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me this? This is such a great story. So I used to just draw all over the walls. I had no idea. I can't
You have
remember.
no memory of it.
No, I can't remember. I
How
do
funny.
remember sitting in front of the TV colouring in. That was my life. I used to colour in and draw. But also my mum was a sewer, so her and I used to, collaborate on you'd call it prom, on my formal dress, or, I'd say, Mum, can you make me this? And she would do it. So I'd be watching her. But I think my love of kind of the arts and crafts came from a very, very early age.
So
and I was obsessed with it.
Did she teach you how to sew?
She has taught me how to sew, yes. I'm not as good as her, but, I know the basics.
But you already had a bit of an education from home prior to going into, schooling.
Yes. Well, kind of, yes. I just loved anything to do with, illustrations and colour and art.
Did you, were you, when you were going to school, were you an academic? Did you love school? Were you really into it? Or were you just like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here?
I kind of loved it. I did love it, but I did love, again, art was my favourite subject. So it was 3-unit art. I think I loved it more for the social aspect, being with my friends.
Right.
My brothers and sister, they're all such high achievers. One's a doctor, the other one's, was a barrister, is now teaching law at university. He's a professor. The other one's an optometrist. The other one's an engineer. And they're like, it would be great if you could become a dentist. And I'm like, well, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah.
So that's why my first degree was more it was welfare studies, but I always loved art. So when I was old enough to really know what I wanted to do, I was like, I'm going back and I'm doing a Bachelor of Design. And that's where I loved, going to uni every day. University was the best.
So are your siblings, are they older than you? Are you in the middle?
Yes,
or?
I'm the youngest.
You're the youngest. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you feel like you had did you have a lot to live up to then? If you're like, this guy's a doctor and a lawyer and a professor and, engineer, did you feel like the pressure was on?
I did, but then I still, was obsessed with my art. So I just kept on doing that. That was my passion.
And the parents were supportive?
Yes, they were. They were.
That's good. It's important. It's helpful when they are, isn't it?
Yeah, education to my parents was like the number one thing that they would put everything into. So they were really strict about, us doing our homework and getting things done on time and, studying. But again, they were also very encouraging of, our passions as well.
Yeah. Well, that's so important. Probably one of the most important things for success in school for a lot of the youth is if they have if it's instilled at home and it's encouraged at home.
Yes.
So at some point after you graduate, so we've mentioned the name Catherine Martin and Boz, who's a very famous film director, and his wife's a very famous designer. Somehow you cross paths with them. How does that happen?
Okay, so what happened, it was my final year of university and Catherine Martin had called my lecturer to ask her, for a student that would be interested in working with them, just helping out around the office, doing some Illustrator work, Photoshop work.
Mm-hmm.
And her name was Catherine Moline, and she had called a friend of mine named Simon. And at the time, there weren't mobile phones around. He wasn't home. So I think I was her next call. I was the second one on her list. And I happened to be home. And I said, yes, sure, I'd love to, So then I made my dad lug the little Apple computer, the square box, the grey square box. I don't know how old you are, Chris. You might not know what I'm talking about.
Oh, no, I'm aware. I'm 44.
And we took it down to Iona in Darlinghurst, and I did a day with Catherine Martin. And she was saying to me that her husband was in LA with Leo. Baz was in LA with Leo, and I had no idea what she was talking about. I didn't know who Baz was. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being, they were doing it was post-production on Romeo and Juliet, and they were doing the press kind of tour. But I loved working with them, and it just became a full-time gig. She asked me to quit my job at David Jones Men's Shoes, which I was working at. Mm-hmm. And that's how it all started. So I always say to Simon, I'm really grateful that you weren't home that day. But since then, I've given Simon work, and I said, come and do some work with us. But he's an incredible designer, and he lives in Tokyo with his wife and kids.
So it sounds like it was a bit of hard work meets luck, because obviously you were on your instructor's mind.
Yes.
Because you were doing so well in school and you were such a hard worker, and at the same time, Simon wasn't there, and you were there to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
So it's like a little bit of fate there, I guess.
Yeah. And I always think as a second degree at university, when you're entering as a mature age student, there's something different about it. You kind of care more and you're more into it,
Yeah. So what do you mean mature age? So did you start later than you normally would have out of high school?
Yes, because it was my second degree. So the first degree was a welfare studies degree that I did for 3 years. And then I thought, I want to do design. I really do want to do it. So I re-entered university as a mature age student.
Oh, okay. I see. Gotcha. Okay. And then that sort of basically started you on this path of working in some capacity in several different films, from Moulin Rouge to The Great Gatsby to Australia with Nicole Kidman and Hugh Jackman, and to the latest Elvis one.
To Elvis.
Yeah.
Yes.
How great is that? Now, you worked in different capacities on each of these pictures, right? Like you weren't doing the same thing every time.
It kind of was the same thing, but I think as the movies got on, I just kept on doing more. I was being more and more involved, except I would say for Elvis, where we were in different states and it was, COVID lockdowns, and I wasn't able to get to the Gold Coast, but I was working remotely. So Catherine Martin and I would Skype every day. We'd Skype in and work that way, which was interesting and fun. But I definitely wish I was there to see the sets and the costumes in real life.
Yeah. I suppose, it's quite a compliment to be working with such a great team, considering, like, when you watch one of Baz's movies, one of the things you notice is it's very visually compelling. It's
It's a feast. It's a visual feast for the eyes.
Yeah, it is. It's almost as if you're watching something, or it's almost as if you're watching something how you would dream it, or almost like a memory that you might embellish a little bit. You're seeing it in this fantastical way, and he really makes that come across in all of his movies. So to have you come on board with a lot of these pictures, I think is really a tribute to you. They must have really trusted you and believed in your talents and abilities to help them make their visions happen. So that's...
Yeah, and it's always, they've always got such a huge team. But I think the advantage I had was I'd worked with them for so many years that we just had this visual language. I understood what they wanted. And, it was kind of secondhand. Like we always kind of are thinking the same thing, which is quite interesting. I was their head designer for 17 years. So our styles are very, very similar, especially now that I've kind of gone out on my own.
Do you find that when you're working with someone for that long that you sort of grow together? Like you almost like in a
Yes.
marriage where the husband starts turning into the wife and the wife starts turning into the husband, and that kind of thing where you kind of are feeding off each other's traits and you pick up certain things. Did you find that working with them creatively, you sort of found yourself, taking
Yes.
on some of their, you know, I don't know what you how you call
Most
what you call it, but their ideas and
Well, yes, we'd all kind of contribute to the language, but
yeah,
I do feel they were a huge part of what I'm doing now. I can't just say that this is where I am without them,
right. It
because
doesn't
of
happen in a
course they
vacuum.
influenced. Yeah, they've influenced my work.
Yeah,
But what I love doing now, which I kind of wasn't able to do working for them, is when you work for yourself. You can go crazy. You can do whatever you like. There's no kind of restrictions. Not that, they had lots of restrictions, but I feel like I can be a bit more wild.
do you miss the direction? Because do you find yourself going, oh, well, I could do anything?
I miss the editing process. So at the moment, I'm designing this new range and I've just got so many options, especially, with the colorways and the designs. And I do miss having, someone there to say, no, that's like just a second eye would be great. But
Yeah.
I've got a little team and I send my, options out and they come back with feedback.
Yeah, so you have to be open to you almost want to make sure you're still open to the criticism because you
Criticism,
can
yes.
sometimes not. It's hard to do it from your own perspective, sit outside yourself and judge it from the outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely need a few different eyes on it to just give me, some proper criticism, constructive criticism.
Right. Before we jump too far away from your resume, I just wanted to touch on a couple of points, or actually just ask you a couple of things because I wasn't sure what the differences were in these different types of in the different capacities that you worked on some of these films. I noticed when I was just doing some research on you that sometimes you were listed as you worked on title design.
Yes.
What is that
That's my
exactly?
other passion. That's my other passion, typography. So it's the opening titles and the credits at the end.
Oh, okay, basically the way the
Yeah,
movie titles look and the credits
that's
and going
right.
in and out. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm totally obsessed with type. So that's, I guess, my graphic design background. So a
Yeah.
lot of their movies, I was designing their titles as well as working in, whether it was the production design department or the costume design department.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And then I wanted to ask you, when you worked on the latest Elvis movie, I
Yeah.
did realize that it was during, the pandemic, and
Yes.
clearly that's a time period piece where everything's happening. Whether it's in the 50s or the 60s and that sort of thing. But on that movie, you were doing costume design. Is that right?
Correct. So I was consulting, the
Okay.
design consultant in the costume department. But yeah, it was really tricky, but we made it work. And, I know the Oscars just happened and we didn't win, but I just think it was definitely Oscar worthy and just such an incredible film, not only in costume, in all departments.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of Elvis as a movie.
So in consulting, did you have to do any of the sourcing? Because that was really my question about that. When working in that environment where you go, okay, I need to get this outfit or this kind of thing from there, or do this, and I imagine it might have been very, very hard to make that kind of thing happen because everything is kind of
Yes.
shut down.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of the stuff were brought in from the States, but we also have a huge team of makers. So most of the stuff that you saw on screen was actually made in the Gold
Okay.
Coast.
And so, were you as a consultant? What was the process like for that? Were they showing you pieces and you saying, "Oh, that collar needs to be wider," or like how were you consulting in that costume design?
So it was basically we'd see all the characters, we'd set out their timelines, we'd say what they were wearing for each scene. Yeah, it was like a day-to-day thing. What are you shooting next? But it started very early on with a lot of research on Elvis's costumes, and he had a massive timeline of what he wore when.
Yeah.
Collaborating with Prada and Miu Miu to get some of the costumes made for our leads. And they were just also getting the original maker of Elvis's costumes to send us costumes as well.
Is that
from
right?
the States. Yeah.
How cool is that? Okay, so then it sounds to me like at some point you said, not that you wouldn't do anything anymore, but you've now started your own, House of Heras studio, houseofheras.com, where you're doing all sorts of. One of the things that stood out to me, you're doing rugs and tea towels and napkins and cushions and tablecloths, shopping bags. I particularly loved the kimonos. I thought they were so cool looking. So what made the transition? How did that happen to go from are you still tied to working with Baz and Catherine, or is this now you're doing your own thing? And
no, I have fingers in many pies. So House of Heras is my baby, but I still do work for them. I still do work for other studios as well. We just did the Mardi Gras float for Coles, which was exciting, and that was costume design for a film production house called Scoundrel. And I've got a little, side collaboration thing with CB2 in the States. So I design stuff for them. There's rugs coming for them. There's mirrors. There's plates. There's lots of new things that they bring out every season in collaboration with House of Heras. So I've got lots of things going all at the same time, but I do fit it in, and it just, whichever one needs the most attention is where I everything's still spinning. I've got lots of wheels spinning, but I like to keep it like that because not that I get bored, but I feel that's kind of more exciting for me.
Yeah, it sounds like it would keep you very busy because sounds like, while it's all maybe in the same world, each thing needs a different type of attention, it sounds like. So
Correct.
I guess it would keep you on your toes, I suppose. But yeah, so I was going through your site and seeing all these different items and noticing a lot of the same types of designs that made it onto the wallpaper, which was really cool. Is there an area that you find that you're maybe most passionate about when it comes to these different items? Are you more into one thing or the other? Are you more into the rugs or into the...
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm into one more than the other, but there is, interestingly, a process that I've seen that's kind of been working well for me, which is after doing loads and loads of research, taking photos, scanning books, starting the designs I always start with are the rugs. So I find that interesting that I then transfer kind of those designs into a wallpaper or a kimono or, a tablecloth. But they all start as rug designs. And then I kind of scale up, scale down, add extra elements and work it so that everything's kind of...
tailored to that.
Yes, everything's
product.
Kind of tailored to the specific application.
So when it came to your designs, was this you actually, doing the drawing and going into Illustrator and Photoshop and creating these pieces? Like, for example, the I think you have a different name for it, I think, on your site, but for the wallpaper, it's called Bush Beauty.
Yes, so the Waratah. So that was just my obsession with Australian, natives, flora and fauna, just how incredible and different our flora is. So that Bush Beauty is based on the Waratah, acacia, the wattle, and that used to be... I've kind of taken that one kind of symbol motif that I've drawn in Illustrator and, again, recolored it and reworked it to apply it to different products.
Then did you learn how to use Illustrator and become proficient at that way back when you were doing university?
Yes, yes, yes. So Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, all of that stuff was, the 4-year course that I did, university degree.
And then I noticed that, so I was just looking at the designs, and even I've seen pretty much almost all these, the bees lace, the prancing peacocks, the gumnut paradise, I've seen in different forms on some of these different products, but I haven't seen the one that we call Majestic Palm, which is more of a tropical looking wallpaper. I haven't seen that on any of the other designs. Is that a newer one compared to everything else that you
Yes.
have on there?
So I had this great artist in Germany hand paint all of these elements for me, and I just kind of put it together and made the repeat. So that was me trying something different and kind of breaking away from the normal, really graphic, solid designs that I put together.
Okay,
But
that
I
makes
love
sense.
it, and it just, I think it's one of Milton and King's bestsellers, so that's really good to hear.
Yeah, well, I was just in Dallas at the office there, and I was in the sample room, and I was just watching those samples fly out of there. A lot of people are interested in having a closer look at that Majestic Palm design. It's really, really good. And I did notice it does stand out from the other, because it's a total of 6 designs, and that one kind of stands out a little bit differently. And like you said, it's not as graphic as the other ones, if that's the correct term. Yeah.
I'd love for it, I'd love to release it in when Milton and King do it, the kind of vinyl textured wallpaper as a larger scale than it exists at the moment, and a few different colorways. That would be my dream.
Yeah, I think that's coming in the near future.
Yes,
I believe.
I think the next couple of months.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get to see that. But yeah, I did notice that one was a bit different. But the cool thing is there's so many different colorways. I'm looking at these, and it's 5, 6,
Again, it was
7
hard
colorways.
to limit to 7. I had about 12 colorways.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And I had to trust the team at Milton and King to come up with their favourite 7.
Yeah.
And the ones they thought, the majority of people would love.
Right. Well, I mean, it's definitely, it's versatile. You've got stuff that's, a bit more neutral for people that like that sort of interiors. And then, obviously the stuff that's a lot more bold. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure you saw it, because I think I saw you reposted it, but we just saw someone on Instagram do Bush Beauty all over their bathroom and all over the ceiling in the pink.
Oh,
and it
I
looked
love it.
amazing.
Amazing, I know.
Is it surreal for you a little bit to see your designs like just on people's walls? And
a little bit, yes. Well, it's interesting because people buy the wallpaper, but I never kind of see what they do with it. So I always love when they post, and it's kind of, it's inspiring for others as well who are thinking of wallpapering.
Well,
but I've got wallpaper all throughout my house now.
Well, yeah, I saw some of the, when we were putting together the early promotions and everything, and I saw some of the images come through, and I thought, I was like, is she putting her own wallpaper in her house? That's so cool.
Yes.
So you installed, I think you installed both the prancing peacocks on the stairway. Is that yours?
Yes. And then the gumnut in the kids' room.
Okay.
And Waratah Wonderland in our bedroom. And then I've got the Majestic Palm up in the studio upstairs.
Well, so you have it all over.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was your house or if it was just, something that was set up or...
No, that was my home.
Oh, how cool. That's really neat. But yeah, wallpaper, unlike a lot of other types of products, it's always a bit of a time thing where, by the time someone is deciding to put up wallpaper and then they get the samples and then they install it and then they take pictures, sometimes it can be several months. So your collection is still fairly fresh. It just came out a couple weeks ago. So it could take a little bit of time before we actually start seeing a lot of the, people's installations come out and see what the results of them are. But I definitely think we'll be seeing a lot of it.
Oh, I hope so. But I just think people are just sampling now, getting samples and seeing which one they want in their home. And then you're right. I think in a few months' time, there'll be lots more of the powder rooms and the kids' rooms and the living rooms
Yeah.
wallpapered.
One of the things that I noticed when I was reading, I just had a brief overview of the blog that's on our site, where there was asked you different questions about stuff, and I noticed a couple of times you had mentioned the 1970s.
Yeah.
What is it about the 70s that appeals to you, do you think?
Do you know what? I think because I was born in the 70s, there's just something about it. It's, the shapes, the colours, what people were wearing, the music, everything about the 70s I'm kind of obsessed with. I'm not sure it's I think my next collection is more kind of focused on that. But I just feel, even though I grew up in the 80s, I kind of remember the 80s more. The
Right.
70s was, don't know why I'm so obsessed with it.
Yeah, well, I did notice that you said it was something that was really going to be, come out a little bit more in the designs that you're doing next. What is it that you're working on right now that's going to be so 70s inspired?
It's just, again, a new collection. So it's starting with the rugs that can then be transferred into wallpaper. So it's a new rug collection.
Okay, so it's starting out with rugs. How did you get into doing the kimonos?
See, that was what I thought my wardrobe was missing.
Oh,
And I
really?
just wanted something kind of colourful and patterned to go over, a pair of jeans or a black dress and I also was obsessed with velvet. So I started with the rayon velvet patterned kimonos, and they were kind of longer and a bit more luxurious.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second kimono I brought out is a silk linen kimono that you can kind of wear over swimmers or, again, over jeans and a T-shirt. And
I
I
didn't.
don't have many left, so it was just a limited number that I made. And they've been really, really popular.
I didn't realize they were actually made of velvet.
The longer one is made of velvet, and I think I've only got two left in the Mary Jane design, which is the green velvet.
Wow, how cool! And all this stuff is actually made in Australia. Is that right?
Yes, so that's the reason why I keep my quantities kind of small is I want it to all be made in Australia. So it's designed, printed, and made in Australia.
Yeah, that's
Which
so
I'm
good.
really proud of, yeah.
You don't have to worry about supply chain issues or any of that kind of headache.
That's right. Quality control.
Yeah. Are you very hands-on with that from the not only the design but production and sales and all that kind of stuff? Are you pretty hands-on?
Yes, it's all me. I have a few people helping, but I feel like I'm a bit of a control freak.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's your baby, so you don't
Yeah.
want people messing around with your baby, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's so cool. I think I'd be very excited to see what this new collection might look like when you get to the point of considering it for wallpapers. I think that's going to be really interesting looking, especially since, when it comes to wallpapers, there's different, everybody has different tastes, but there definitely is a cohort of people that love everything from like what's called the grand millennial style, or the kind of more retro looking wallpapers. I would imagine that stuff that feels a bit 70s inspired is going to be really popular.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, it just has that nostalgic thing to it. And I suppose, a lot of it can be obviously updated to be kind of a new meets old, modernizing a style that's, technically a retro style, but making it new. I would imagine that would be actually something really interesting, because I'm not sure I've seen much of that, to be honest. I've seen, like I said, a lot of grand millennial stuff that you would see from maybe the early 60s or, wallpaper from the 50s, but I feel like wallpaper from the 70s has a bad name. Like
Yes.
70s and 80s wallpaper has a really
but
bad name.
reinterpreted wallpaper from the 70s.
Exactly.
Or
That's what
no,
I mean.
reinterpreted, yeah, influenced by the 70s. Yes, hopefully won't be so bad.
Yeah, you'll have to say, you'll be saving the reputation of all those people that, were traumatized
Around.
by wallpaper in the 70s and 80s that, their parents put
It's
it up
so
and then they
true.
had to take it down and it was a nightmare.
Oh, even my parents had the beautiful flocked wallpaper and they all took it down when they moved in.
Oh,
I
really?
always say to them, I can't believe you did that. Yeah.
Does anybody in your family, whether it's your siblings or your parents or anything, have any of them put up any of your wallpaper yet?
No, but my parents have my rug,
Oh, they do.
and my brother is has a few samples, so they're thinking about it. And my in-laws have some samples that they want to put in their bedroom. So it's all very new, but they're excited.
How cool.
Yeah,
And are the kids, supportive? Do they fully grasp what
oh
mom's doing in terms of
yeah, they
her
are
work?
so supportive. And my little girl, she's like this expert of Procreate on her iPad. So she's always drawing and trying to give me ideas for my next collection, which is very sweet.
Oh, so are you instilling in them the artistic
I think they've got it
flair?
already. Both of them are quite creative. So we'll see where they go with that.
Yeah, because I imagine you growing up with such a strong educational focus, you'd be doing the same thing for your children as well.
Yeah.
One before I let you go, one other thing that I wanted to ask you about, it just sort of popped in my mind, was how you were talking about how Australia has such unique flora and fauna, and it makes its way on the designs. And we work with a few Australian designers and artists, and it's a pretty common thing. And you'd think, of course, it's a common thing. That's what you're growing up around, and that's what you're seeing. But I'd recently had a conversation with Jacqueline Colley, who's a UK designer and one of our
Hmm.
wallpaper designers. And one of the things she said that really stuck out to me was she said it's really hard to be a tourist in your own, like in your own city, in your own where you live. It's hard to be a tourist where you live. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times people won't appreciate those things because they're just so natural and they're around you. Do you feel like do you appreciate those things because maybe you traveled and then you were able to come back and see it? Or do you feel like a responsibility to promote Australian things? Or how is it that those things sort of entered your artistic appreciation?
I think because we're living in and amongst it, it's not like we see waratahs all the time. So it's kind of a bit special when you do see a waratah. But it's like what my eye was drawn to. You recognize the beauty and you're like, I just want to bring that into my designs. But also what you say about traveling, going to you know, we're about to go to Spain and France and Italy for 3 months. And I'm hoping that that will give me a new kind of design eye. It re-energizes your creative juices, and you come back and you kind of have a fresh eye. But it is about what you're surrounded by, recognizing that it's special, and then kind of trying to bring that out in your design. And it just happens to be that I'm in Australia. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm trying to promote the country. It's just something that I think is beautiful and I want the world to see it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's funny. I just recently was, like I said, it was at the Dallas office, and I've born and raised in California, and I didn't
Yeah.
actually appreciate California as much. But when I went to Dallas, which has its own cool things about it, but it's all very flat. And
Right.
then when I came back to LA, and I was all the hills and you have the mountains and San Gabriel Mountains and the beach over there and the desert's just an hour away. I started really appreciating, like, oh wow, California is beautiful. And like I always knew it
Yeah.
was beautiful, but sometimes you have to kind of go away from it to
Step
actually
away.
appreciate, to be
Yeah.
that to be that tourist in your own city kind of thing.
Yeah. I always remember flying into Sydney going, oh, it's so beautiful. Like you miss it and you do recognize its beauty again once you leave it.
Yeah. Well, Sydney is a beautiful city. I mean, everywhere I've been in Australia, I've really thought was really special. With its
Yes, we
own,
have.
each place has its own character. You know, you go to Melbourne or Brisbane or Perth, or each place has its own unique thing. Aside from being uniquely Australian, each place has its own thing within Australia that is pretty special, I think.
Yes, it's true.
Have you? I imagine you've traveled around Australia a bunch.
Yes, so when we made the movie Australia, we were based in Kununurra, which is up north. And that was really special because I'd never been to anywhere like it before. And it was, the Kimberley Ranges. We were in Darwin. So it's just a different kind of climate, different landscape, different animals, different, trees and flowers. But it was just like nowhere else. Like, it's not like a big city, or it's the outback. And that was really special. But I haven't even been to Tasmania. I've been to every other state but Tasmania. So that's my next trip.
Oh, Tasmania is beautiful. It is beautiful.
Yeah,
I've been there before.
I really want to go.
That'll have to be on the next thing on the list, on the bucket list.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and getting on this call. I've used about an hour of your time, so I'll let you get back to all the different projects and things that you've got your hands in.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Chris.